I was sitting in the kitchen having a cup of decaf coffee before going back upstairs to shower and get ready for work when Ginger entered. She had an old nightgown on and her robe and looked like she hadn't slept much either. I just stared at her without otherwise acknowledging her as she came up to me and looked into my eyes. "Jack, I cannot tell you how sorry I am, but I can't keep telling you that for the rest of my life. I can only show you that I mean it. I want to accept your offer to allow me to stay with you as your wife. I accept any conditions you want to make regarding my future activities, and I will call and quit my job at the bank effective immediately. You understand that you will be my wife in name only. I do not plan to have it with you, and you will be staying in the spare room indefinitely. As far as I am concerned, you will be the live-in maid and the caregiver of my children. You will receive a weekly stipend as a maid and an allowance to purchase groceries and other items needed to run the home. I understand, and I will make up some excuse to tell the kids why I'm sleeping in the spare room. Good. I'm going to get ready for work. If you're enjoying my content, consider joining my Patreon community. By becoming a patron, you'll get access to full parts of my videos much earlier than everyone else. Plus, you'll be supporting me to create even more awesome content for you. Check out the link in the description to join now. Sweetheart, can I make you some breakfast before you go? By the way, you have lost the right to call me sweetheart or any other terms of endearment. My name is Jack, and yes, you may have breakfast ready for me when I come down. I understand, Jack. When I got to work, I called Sam and told him to discontinue any further activities on my case and asked how long it would take to get a final report on what he'd found so far. He said he would have it completed that afternoon as everything was already in his computer, including the photos. Immediately after finishing it, he would have a copy sent to me and one to my lawyer, John Masters, via courier. For some reason I didn't know about at the time, I asked him not to reference anything about the video he had taken of my wife at her tryst in his report, but to forward it to me. He agreed to do that and didn't question my motives, as he had enough evidence with the still photos to support the report's conclusions. I then called John Masters and updated him on what Sam had found out and that a copy of the report would be at his office later today. We made an appointment for me and Ginger to be at his office the following day after he'd had a chance to read it. John, I want you to look at the report with the thought that I'd like to go after the bank and John Harding. I'm bringing Ginger tomorrow so you can listen to her story and to provide her deposition for any case that we pursue. Okay, Jack, I'll read the report when it gets here and be in a position to discuss it tomorrow when you get here. The rest of the day I made some phone calls canceling joint credit cards and took my lunch hour to move accounts to another bank in my name only from the one Ginger had worked. I also set up our savings in my father's name as a trust fund for the children. When I got home that night, I brought my copy of the report with me, and after dinner, while the kids were busy doing homework, I sat down with her in the family room and showed it to her. I did not mention anything about a video, as I'd stopped at our new bank on my way home and rented a safe deposit box for it. Ginger sobbed as she thumbed through it and realized how thoroughly it had been prepared to document her adultery. I don't know what to say, Jack. I just want you to know what I will have in a safe deposit box if you fail me again. I understand. I want you to be at John Masters' office tomorrow morning at 10 and be prepared to make a deposition about your affair with John Harding. You also need to find the name of a good psychiatrist and make an appointment to get in to see him as soon as possible. Yes, I'll be there and I'll do anything you say. I want you to know I called the bank today and quit my job. I did not try to contact John Masters at all. I also got the name of a psychiatrist today, and the earliest I could get in to see him will be next week. All right. My chest still felt tight, and I was still popping the Valium periodically to try to keep things under control. I was beginning to feel depressed and very sad. That night I had more nightmares and determined that I may need the help of a psychiatrist myself before this affair all played out. The next day I took off from work at 9:45 to meet with John and Ginger, who was driving her own car to John's office. I had told my boss that I was having some personal problems that needed to be resolved, and he understood and told me to take the rest of the day off if I needed it. When I got to John's office the next morning, I found Ginger in the waiting room, and together we went in to see him. John greeted us and waved us to chairs facing the desk. I've read the PI's report, and now I need to talk with Ginger to determine what sort of a case we might have to pursue, a case against the bank, John Harding, and any other individuals that might have been involved in it. So why don't you tell me about it, Ginger? Ginger looked at me. You're going to pursue a case against John and the bank? I'm going to try to destroy John Harding, and the bank should pay because it all started in their classroom. Ginger quietly turned away, and her shoulders shook as though she were sobbing. After a few minutes, she turned back and said, "I'm ready to tell you about it." Tears were running down her face, and John handed her a box of tissues to use. After she dried her eyes, she began to tell John essentially the same story she told me before. When she was done, John thought a moment before speaking. "I think we have a case to pursue against the bank and John Harding and anyone else who may have been involved, especially if they were also employees of the bank. First, Ginger, I need your signed deposition. I'll go over a few points you need to emphasize, and then I'll turn you over to my secretary, and she'll transcribe your story, and then we'll have you sign it, and she'll notarize your signature. Then I can proceed to have the bank, John Harding and persons unknown, served with the necessary papers. We'll go in for about a $10 million judgment, but I must warn you the leverage they will try use as publicity, but they will be just as anxious to avoid some publicity on this as we are. We'll also proceed to get John Harding fired, and the return of any photos or videos he has." After waiting to get Ginger's deposition completed, I returned to work. I thought about going home, but I didn't want to be alone with Ginger. When I thought about her, I felt the rage build up again, and I just couldn't face looking at her or being with her. I began to seriously think about a separation as the best answer to our problem, but our children deserved a family, and I vowed to stick it out even though I knew I was going into a mental condition caused by rage and depression. For the next 2 months we lived together, and even though the rage abated, I found myself coping with bouts of depression that at times left me almost incapacitated. I had to take a leave of absence from work. As Ginger started with her psychiatrist, I began to go to one myself. It took another 2 months before he was able to get my medication adjusted to where I could almost function almost normally again and return to work. I know the children suffered because of my condition and the poor relationship I had with their mother. So our lives together went on, and after a year, it had improved to the point where Ginger was sharing our bed again, although we didn't try to have it for a month or more. I found myself impotent with her when I tried to initiate intercourse, but after the doctor prescribed me pills, we were able to have it again. Eventually, we managed to settle into a normal husband/wife relationship, and I could give up my dependence on pills. Our family interrelationships began to return to normal. In the meantime, our lawyer, John Masters, pursued legal action against the bank and John Harding. The outcome was that an out-of-court settlement of $3 million was negotiated with the bank. The bank fired John Harding, and his wife divorced him. We received a judgment against him for $500,000, and he had to move away and start a new life in another state so he could find another job and pay his alimony and child support. I took the money we received from the bank and Harding and put most of it into a trust for the children and named John Masters as administrator. Eventually, I was able to reduce my medications for depression and anxiety, and we started marriage counseling. Ginger found out from her psychiatrist what some of the causes were in getting involved with John Harding and learned how to guard against letting submissiveness trap herself into a similar situation in the future. After a few years, our marriage resumed the comfortable relationship we had known before her affair, though I kept closer tabs on her activities than before. Ginger never went back to work. As we approached our 25th wedding anniversary, our eldest son, David, had graduated from college, was married, and had given us a grandson, Eric. Ginger and I were both doting grandparents. Sandra was a senior in college, and Michael was a freshman. We were proud of our children and their accomplishments. It was a couple of weeks before our 25th anniversary that I noticed a subtle change in her behavior and activities. I couldn't believe she was involved in another affair after all these years. Our life was still good, I thought. I tried to give her what she wanted, so why would she stray? I began to watch her more carefully, and I began by checking her email account. Though it appeared she made some attempt to hide it, I discovered emails from someone named Charles thanking her for something she'd done for him and begging her to meet him for a proper thank you. Her responses were initially non-committal, but he persisted until she finally agreed to meet him at a hotel room on the Saturday evening before our anniversary, which fell on the following Monday. He told her he'd reserved room 524 at the hotel and would meet her there at 6:30 p.m. My old chest pains were developing again, as well as my depression and my rage. How and why would she be unfaithful to me again? I'd already made reservations for the two of us for an anniversary dinner on the Monday evening, and I began to think of it as a farewell dinner for our marriage. I decided I wouldn't hire a PI this time, but just go and confront her with her lover at the hotel, then go from there. Saturday morning, she told me that she had to go to the hospital that evening for a couple of hours to visit a sick friend. Trying to act as natural as I could, I acknowledged her information with a nod and went back to reading the morning paper. The day passed slowly, and I had to dig around until I found my old container of Valium to keep myself calm. About 6 o'clock, Ginger took off, and after waiting half an hour, I followed her to the hotel. When I got there, I mulled how I was going to gain entry to the room she was using. I found an old baseball cap and jacket in the trunk of my car and took it with me and went into the hotel. It was an upscale hotel and sold cut flowers in the shop off the lobby. I bought a large bouquet and took the elevator to the 5th floor. Finding room 524, I donned the cap and jacket, and holding the flowers in front of my face, I knocked on the door. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I waited. I was a nervous wreck. "Who is it?" I heard my wife ask through the door. "Flower delivery, ma'am," I answered, trying to disguise my voice. I heard the door unlatch and she looked out and said, "I didn't order any flowers. You must." About that time, I dropped the flowers and pushed my way into the room. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Oh, Jack, you're right on time. There isn't anyone. I just did that to get you down here. The kids are putting on an anniversary dinner for us tonight, and they wanted to surprise you. Now put on your suit on the bed there." I remember going over and looking in the bath to confirm that she was alone, and then I spun around to look at her as she stood looking at me with a smile on her face. My mind was numb for a few seconds, and then something snapped and I felt a rage building up that seemed to overwhelm me. What the hell had she done? She knew the problems I'd had years ago getting over her affair. Why did she use a similar situation to get me down here? Just as I was about to lay into her, everything started to go black, and I felt myself falling and sliding into a deep hole. I heard Ginger cry, "Jack," before everything went black. So now it was the next day, and I was in an ICU unit at the local hospital.